Yo, what's up, gamers? Tonight we're diving into the Freljord, which is basically what happens when Riot's writers looked at a frozen wasteland and said, you know what this needs? More trauma, more political dysfunction, and some reality-ending void monsters for spice. I'm talking about a region so messed up it makes your worst-ranked experience look like a relaxing ARAM. We've got three major factions who all hate each other, gods who can't agree on anything, and an immortal ice witch who's been covering up the biggest mistake in history for literal thousands of years. It's honestly more dramatic than your team's mental breakdown after someone steals blue buff. So real quick, smash that like button if you're here for the most unhinged bedtime story you'll hear all week. Subscribe if you want more lore deep dives that'll put you to sleep in the best way possible, and drop a comment telling me your main, and whether you think the Freljord has any hope of not being a complete disaster. No judgment. We all know this region's doomed. I just want to know if you think they'll figure it out before the apocalypse or after. Now get comfortable. Dim those lights. Maybe turn on a fan or some rain sounds. Grab some water because your mouth's gonna get dry, and put your phone on Do Not Disturb. Seriously, silence everything, because you're about to pass out halfway through this, and that's exactly the goal here. Let's pause for a second though. Have you ever wondered how an entire region can be this dysfunctional? Like, how does a place with three separate governments, multiple angry gods, and literal apocalypse monsters sealed under the ice still somehow function? What kind of decisions have to be made for eternal winter and constant warfare to become the status quo that everyone just accepts? How do you go from three sisters ruling together in peace to everyone's trying to kill each other while sitting on top of a frozen prison containing reality-eating void monsters? Is it worse than losing your diamond promos 5 times in a row? Debatable, but it's definitely in the same category of suffering. And here's the real question. Could you survive even one day in the Freljord? Not as a champion with broken abilities and true ice weapons, just as a regular person trying not to freeze, not get raided, not get eaten by something with too many teeth, and not accidentally discover secrets that'll get you disappeared by an immortal ice witch. Because spoiler alert, most people don't survive. The Freljord has a mortality rate that would make Dark Souls look casual. Alright, congratulations. You've just spawned into the ancient Freljord back before everything went completely sideways. The year is roughly 8,000 years before present day. You've got three sisters ruling in relative peace, tribes that mostly cooperate, and a future that looks almost hopeful. You have no idea that you're about to witness the worst decision in Runeterra's history. You have no clue that something's waking up beneath the ice. Your flash is on cooldown, your wards are missing, and your mental is about to get absolutely destroyed. Welcome to the Freljord. This is gonna hurt. Let's begin. Alright, so let's talk about the Freljord before it became the frozen hellscape where everyone's either trying to survive or actively griefing each other. Picture this: three sisters, Avarosa, Cyrilda, and Lysandra, ruling together in what was basically the golden age of we're not trying to kill each other yet. They had magic, they had unity, they had hope. It was like that one perfect team comp in Champ Select, where everyone's vibing and no one's hovering Yasuo. But here's the thing about perfect moments in League lore. Riot doesn't let them last. Because up in the Howling Abyss, something ancient and absolutely unhinged was about to wake up. And these three sisters were about to learn that sometimes the real enemy isn't the enemy team. It's the decisions you make when you're desperate and completely out of options. So imagine you're standing in the ancient Freljord, back when it wasn't just endless snow and survival horror. The sun actually breaks through the clouds sometimes. People aren't constantly fighting over scraps of food and territory. The three sisters have their own tribes, sure, but they work together. They share resources. They defend each other. It's functional, it's peaceful, it's the kind of teamwork you dream about in solo queue but never actually experience. Avarosa's got her diplomatic approach, bringing people together through shared values and mutual respect. Cyrilda's there too, doing her thing, keeping things balanced. And then there's Lysandra, who's got ice magic and ambition in equal measure. For a while, it actually works. The Freljord isn't warm, it's never been warm, but it's livable. People have communities, they have culture. They have a future that doesn't involve getting frozen to death or eaten by a yeti. But then the tremors start. Not earthquake tremors, reality tremors. The kind that make you feel like the entire world is glitching out. Like when your ping spikes to 500 and you can't tell if you're lagging or if the game's about to crash. Except this isn't lag. This is something trying to break through from the void, from a place that shouldn't exist, and it's targeting the Freljord specifically. The sisters feel it. Their people feel it. Something ancient and malevolent is waking up beneath the ice, and it's hungry. Not hungry for food or power, hungry for non-existence itself. It wants to unmake reality, to delete everything like a failed custom game. And the three sisters realize they're standing at the front line of an invasion that could end not just the Freljord, but all of Runeterra. No pressure though, right? Now here's where you need to understand what the Watchers actually are, because calling them monsters is like calling a pentakill a decent play. It's technically accurate, but massively understates the situation. The Watchers aren't just some spooky creatures from the void. They're like if the concept of getting deleted from existence became sentient and decided it hated reality itself. We're talking about beings that existed before existence, floating in the nothingness of the void, perfectly content in the silent emptiness. Then creation happened. Light, matter, time, all that stuff, and it disturbed them. Imagine you're in a perfectly quiet Discord call, just vibing in silence, and then someone joins and starts blasting music at max volume while screaming into their mic. That's how the Watchers feel about the universe existing. They looked at reality and went, yeah, this whole existing thing, not a fan. Let's delete it. So these things start pushing through into Runeterra, specifically targeting the Freljord because apparently that's where the barrier between dimensions is thinnest. Lucky them. The Watchers aren't coming to conquer or rule, they're coming to erase. They want to return everything to the silent void, to unmake creation itself, to hit the cosmic reset button and never turn it back on. And they're strong. We're talking true damage to existence itself, bypassing all resistances, ignoring all shields. When a Watcher looks at something, that something stops being. When it touches reality, reality breaks. The ancient Freljordians who first encountered them didn't even have words for what they were seeing, because language itself seemed inadequate. It's like trying to describe getting one shot by a Fed assassin to someone who's never played League. The words exist, but they can't capture the experience. The three sisters watch as their world starts crumbling at the edges. Villages disappear. People vanish. The ice itself seems to scream. And they realize they have two options. Find a way to fight beings that can erase reality, or watch everything end. Avarosa wants to unite everyone, to fight together. Cyrilda's strategizing, looking for weaknesses. And Lysandra? Lysandra's looking at the Watchers and thinking about power. Because here's the thing about desperate situations. They make people do unhinged things. And Lysandra's about to make the most griefing decision in Freljordian history. Okay, so this next part, absolutely unhinged. Lysandra, the Ice Witch herself, made what might be the most griefing decision in all of Runeterra lore. While her sisters wanted to fight the Watchers head on, you know, the honorable we scale late approach, Lysandra said nah, and straight up made a deal with these reality-ending monsters. It's like your support deciding to help the enemy team, because they don't think your ADC can carry. Except instead of losing LP, she doomed the entire Freljord to an eternal ice age. She approached the Watchers, these beings of pure negation, and basically said, hey, what if instead of erasing everything, you give me power and I'll help you? And they agreed. Because apparently, even cosmic horrors from beyond reality can appreciate a good betrayal. The deal goes down in secret. Lysandra doesn't tell her sisters what she's doing because she knows they'd try to stop her. She meets with the Watchers in the depths beneath the ice, in places where reality is already thin and breaking, and they offer her everything. Dark ice magic that makes regular ice magic look like a snowball fight. Immortality, because why not throw in eternal life when you're already selling out your entire civilization? The power to freeze anything, to create ice that never melts, to reshape the Freljord itself. And all she has to do is open the door a little wider, let the Watchers through, help them unmake creation. Simple transaction, right? Except Lysandra takes the power and immediately starts having second thoughts. Because watching reality actually start to unravel, seeing what the Watchers do when they fully manifest apparently triggers some kind of wait. Maybe this was a bad idea moment. Too late though. The damage is done. The Watchers are coming through, and now Lysandra's got blood, or ice technically, on her hands. Her sisters find out, obviously. You can't secretly help apocalyptic void monsters without someone noticing. Avarosa is devastated because she trusted Lysandra completely. Cyrilda's furious because betrayal is bad enough without it being reality-ending betrayal. And Lysandra is standing there with her new dark ice powers like I can explain, except there's no explanation that makes I help the void monsters sound reasonable. The Freljord's tribes are in chaos. The Watchers are manifesting in greater numbers. Reality's breaking down at the edges. And the three sisters who once ruled together are now fracturing apart just when unity matters most. It's like watching your team fall apart in Champ Select, except instead of dodging and losing 3 LP, the consequence is the apocalypse. Could be worse though. Could be getting autofilled jungle. But here's where it gets even more complicated because Lysandra's not actually evil in the cartoonish villain way. She made the deal because she was terrified. She saw the Watchers and realized conventional fighting wasn't going to work. She thought maybe if she had their power, she could understand them, control them, find a weakness. It's the kind of logic that makes sense at 3 a.m. when you're exhausted and desperate, like deciding to pick Yasuo because maybe this time will be different. Spoiler, it's never different. Lysandra genuinely believed she was making the tactical play, the 200 IQ move that would save everyone. Instead, she accelerated the disaster and destroyed any trust her sisters had in her. And now, she's got to live with that, literally, forever. Because she took immortality as part of the deal, which means she doesn't even get the mercy of dying and escaping the consequences. Let me tell you about Avarosa, the one sister in this story who wasn't completely unhinged. While Lysandra was out here making Faustian bargains with void monsters, Avarosa was trying to unite the Freljord through. Get this, actual diplomacy and hope. Revolutionary concept, I know. She believed people could work together, that tribes didn't have to constantly fight over scraps, and that maybe, just maybe, the Freljord could be more than a frozen deathmatch arena. She's basically that one teammate in low elo who's still trying to shot call and keep morale up while everyone else is flaming in chat. Avarosa gathered followers, built alliances, and genuinely tried to save her people from both the Watchers and the Eternal Winter. She was the carry this region desperately needed. Picture Avarosa traveling between tribes, talking to leaders who'd been enemies for generations, convincing them that the real threat isn't each other. It's the reality-eating monsters trying to break through from the void. She's charismatic. She's genuine. She actually cares about people in a way that's rare in League lore. When she speaks, people listen. When she promises protection, she delivers. She's building an actual coalition, a unified force that could maybe stand against the Watchers if everyone works together. It's the kind of idealistic leadership that sounds naive until you realize she's actually pulling it off. Tribes that have been raiding each other for centuries are sitting down at the same table. Warriors who've killed each other's families are agreeing to fight side by side. Avarosa's creating something beautiful in the middle of an apocalypse, and for a moment it looks like it might actually work. But then her sister's betrayal comes to light, and everything Avarosa built starts cracking. Because how do you maintain unity when one of your co-leaders just sold everyone out to void monsters? How do you keep people believing in cooperation when betrayal came from the top? Avarosa doesn't give up though. She doubles down. She tells her people that Lysandra's actions are exactly why unity matters, why they need to stand together. She argues that if they fracture now, the Watchers win. And people believe her because she's earned that trust. But you can see the strain on her. The weight of knowing her sister doomed them all. The pressure of holding together an alliance that's one bad day away from collapsing. Avarosa's carrying the entire Freljord's hope on her shoulders. And unlike in League where you can just FF at 15, she doesn't have the option to surrender. And of course, because this is League lore and Riot's writers have a pathological need to make good people suffer, Avarosa's story ends in tragedy. She fights at the Howling Abyss, leading her united tribes against the Watchers. She wields her true ice bow, firing arrows that can pierce through void creatures. She's there on the front lines, proving that her ideals aren't just words. She'll die for them if she has to. And here's the thing. She does. Avarosa falls in the final battle, giving everything to seal the Watchers away. Her death becomes legend. Her bow becomes a relic passed down through generations. Her ideals survive in the Avarosan tribe that carries her, named thousands of years later. But she doesn't get to see any of it. She doesn't get to know that Ash will eventually try to finish what she started. She just dies fighting void monsters because her sister made a terrible deal. If that's not the most League of Legends thing ever, I don't know what is. Now let's talk about Serilda, the third sister who basically got written out of history like a champion that got removed from the game. While Avarosa gets remembered as a hero and Lysandra gets to be an immortal villain, Serilda just kind of vanished from the records. We know she existed. We know she fought alongside her sisters, and we know she probably disagreed with Lysandra's "let's make a deal with cosmic horrors" strategy. But beyond that, the lore is basically like, Serilda was there, and then she wasn't, moving on. It's the equivalent of your jungler disconnecting at level 3, and nobody ever mentions them again. Some say she died in the war against the Watchers. Others think Lysandra erased her from history on purpose. Either way, Serilda represents everyone who tried to do the right thing in the Freljord and got absolutely zero credit for it. What we do know is that Serilda had her own following, her own tribe. There's a weapon named after her, Serilda's Grudge, which suggests she was important enough to be remembered in items, even if not in history books. The name Grudge implies she had some serious beef with someone, probably Lysandra after the whole betrayal thing. Can you imagine being the third sister, watching your siblings' conflict tear apart everything you've built? It's like being in a Discord call where your two friends are having a massive argument and you're just sitting there like, can we please just run one more game? Except instead of ruining your ranked session, it's ruining an entire civilization. Serilda probably tried to mediate, tried to fix things, and ultimately got caught in the middle of forces way beyond anyone's control. The fact that her story got erased is suspicious. Lysandra's immortal and has spent thousands of years manipulating history, so it's entirely possible she deliberately removed Serilda from the narrative. Maybe Serilda knew too much about the betrayal. Maybe she tried to expose Lysandra. Maybe she was the one person who could have united people against the Ice Witch, so Lysandra made sure nobody would remember her. Or maybe she just died fighting and nobody bothered to write it down properly because they were too busy dealing with the apocalypse. Either way, Pour one out for Serilda, the forgotten sister who probably deserved better than becoming a footnote in her own story. Alright, so the Howling Abyss isn't just that ARAM map where you spam abilities and hope your team is poke. It's literally the site of the biggest disaster in Freljordian history. This is where the Watchers tried to break into reality, where Lyssandra's betrayal went down, and where the three sisters made their last stand against the Void. Picture this: a massive bridge over an endless chasm, ice everywhere, and at the bottom, something so horrible that even looking at it would break your mental worse than a 40-minute loss. The battle here was so catastrophic that it literally scarred the land forever. We're talking reality warping magic, sisters fighting sisters, and the entire fate of Runeterra hanging in the balance. The Howling Abyss gets its name from the sounds that echo up from the depths, screams, whispers, the noise of reality tearing itself apart. It's not wind making those sounds. It's the Watchers below, still trying to break through, still pushing against the ice prison that holds them. When you stand on that bridge, you can feel the cold seeping into your bones, but it's not natural cold. It's the cold of the void, of nothingness trying to unmake existence. The ancient Freljordians who fought here describe feeling like they were being erased just by proximity to the Watchers. Their memories started fading. Their sense of self started dissolving. It's like getting CC chained for so long that you forget what champion you're even playing. And when it was over, when Lysandra finally sealed the Watchers beneath the ice using, well, we'll get to that horrific detail. The Howling Abyss became a monument to the worst day in Freljordian history. The bridge remains, the chasm remains, and below, in the frozen depths, the Watchers remain. Trapped but not dead. Dormant but not defeated. Just waiting. Every tremor in the ice, every crack, every unusual frost pattern, it all suggests they're still down there, still pushing, still trying to finish what they started. So yeah, next time you load into ARAM and you're standing on that bridge, just remember, you're literally standing on top of a frozen prison holding back creatures that want to delete reality. Makes getting poked out by a Lux feel less bad, doesn't it? Now, here's where it gets weird. True ice isn't just fancy frozen water. It's literally magical ice that never melts and can cut through basically anything. Think of it like the infinity edge of ice weapons, except instead of crit damage, it gives you frostbite and existential dread. The Freljord has entire bloodlines built around wielding true ice, because apparently having a normal weapon isn't hard mode enough. Champions like Ashe, Sejuani, and Braum all use true ice weapons, and they're passed down through generations like cursed family heirlooms. But here's the thing. True ice is connected to the Watcher's magic. It's born from the same dark power that nearly ended the world. So every time someone picks up a true ice bow or flail, they're technically wielding a fragment of an apocalypse. True ice forms in places where the Watcher's influence seeped into reality. When Lysandra made her deal and took their power, that magic corrupted the regular ice, transforming it into something permanent and unnatural. It doesn't obey the laws of thermodynamics. It stays frozen regardless of temperature. You could throw true ice into a volcano and it would just sit there, frozen solid, probably freezing the lava around it out of spite. The Freljordians discovered they could forge it into weapons and tools, and if you had the right bloodline, if you were iceborn, you could actually wield it without dying. Everyone else who touches true ice gets frostbite so severe that their limbs literally shatter. It's like picking up a weapon that's permanently applying grievous wounds to yourself. And the Freljordians are out here treating it like it's just really good loot. They pass down true ice weapons through family lines. They fight wars over deposits of the stuff. Entire tribal hierarchies are based on who can wield true ice and who can't. It's become so integrated into their culture that they've forgotten or never knew that every piece of true ice is essentially a fragment of the void monsters that almost destroyed their world. Ash shoots arrows made of reality-warping ice. Sejuani swings a flail that could probably freeze a dragon solid. Braum has a door, yes, a door, made of the stuff. And it's indestructible. Meanwhile, the source of all this power is still sealed beneath the howling abyss, waiting, just vibing, definitely not planning anything, totally safe. Let's talk about the Iceborn, the people in the Freljord who can actually survive wielding true ice without immediately dying from frostbite. They're basically the challenger players of this frozen wasteland, genetically blessed, absurdly powerful, and constantly having to prove they deserve their rank. The Iceborn are descendants of people who survived the Watcher's invasion, and their bloodlines carry magic resistance that lets them touch true ice without getting deleted. Sounds cool, right? Wrong. Because being Iceborn means you're automatically thrust into leadership, combat, and political drama whether you want it or not. You don't get to just vibe and farm. You're expected to lead armies, fight monsters, and probably die gloriously in battle. Being born Iceborn is like spawning into a ranked game with Challenger MMR when you've never played before. Sure, you've got the potential, but everyone expects you to carry immediately. Your tribe looks to you for leadership. Other Iceborn want to test you in combat to see if you're actually worthy. And if you can't handle wielding true ice, if your bloodline isn't strong enough, then you're basically useless in Freljordian society. You had one job: don't die when touching the magic ice. And you failed. Your family's legacy ends with you. No pressure though. Just the weight of generations of ancestors judging you every time you pick up a weapon. The Iceborn also age differently. Some of them live for centuries, sustained by the same magic that lets them wield true ice, which means you could be fighting wars for literal hundreds of years, watching everyone you care about who isn't Iceborn die of old age while you just keep going. It's like being stuck in an infinite ranked grind where you can never quit, never take a break, never say, "That's enough league for today." You're just fighting forever, leading forever, carrying your tribe forever, until something finally manages to kill you. And in the Freljord, where everything is trying to kill you all the time, that's honestly probably a relief when it happens. Pour one out for the Iceborn. Genetically blessed, culturally cursed, and definitely not having the great time everyone assumes they are. Okay, so Ash is basically that one person in your friend group who's trying to hold everyone together while everyone else is losing their minds. She's the Iceborn leader of the Avarosan tribe, wielding her ancestors' true ice bow and attempting to unite the Freljord through diplomacy instead of just bonking everyone with weapons. Noble goal, right? Except the Freljord is full of people who think diplomacy means whoever survives the fight gets to make the rules. Ash is out here hosting peace summits while Sejuani's planning raids and Lyssandra's hiding her dark secrets. She represents hope, unity, and the idea that maybe the Freljord doesn't have to be a frozen battle royale forever. Ash's story starts with her discovering Avarosa's true ice bow, the same weapon her ancestor used thousands of years ago. Finding it isn't just lucky, it's basically the universe saying congratulations, you're now responsible for saving an entire region. She could have just kept it as a cool family heirloom, maybe hung it on a wall. But no. She decides to actually use it, to live up to the legacy, to try finishing what Avarosa started. And people follow her because she's genuine. When Ash promises something, she delivers. When she says she'll protect your tribe, she actually shows up. In a region where most leaders rule through fear and strength, Ash rules through trust and competence. It's refreshing. It's also incredibly difficult because trust is fragile, and the Freljord is really good at breaking things. She married Tryndamere to unite their tribes, which is basically a political arranged marriage, except both of them are actually trying to make it work. Tryndamere brings his warriors and his whole too angry to die energy. Ash brings her archers and her diplomatic network. Together, they're trying to build something that might actually last. But it's hard. Every day there's a new crisis. Raiders attacking, resources running low, other tribes refusing to cooperate, and somewhere in the background, Lyssandra's plotting something while Sejuani's calling Ash soft for not just conquering everyone. Ash is essentially playing support in a game where everyone else wants to be the carry, and somehow, she's still keeping the team together. The fact that she hasn't given up yet is honestly more impressive than any pentakill. Now let's talk about Sejuani, who is basically the embodiment of, I didn't hear no bell. While Ash is trying to unite the Freljord through peace, Sejuani looked at that strategy and said, that's cute anyway, I'm going to conquer everyone through sheer force and determination. She leads the Winter's Claw, a tribe that believes only the strong survive, and if you can't handle the cold, you deserve to freeze. It's the Freljordian equivalent of a hard-stuck diamond player who refuses to play anything but carry champions. Sejuani grew up in the harshest conditions, watching her mother lead and eventually fall, and she learned that mercy is a luxury the Freljord can't afford. Sejuani's childhood was basically a masterclass in everything that can go wrong will go wrong. Her mother, Kalkia, ruled the Winter's Claw before her, and she was even more brutal. No weakness tolerated, no mercy given. If you couldn't keep up with the tribe, you got left behind to freeze. Sejuani watched this growing up, absorbed it, internalized it. She learned to fight before she learned to read. She survived her first raid before she was 10, and when her mother finally died, probably in combat because peaceful deaths aren't really a thing in the Freljord, Sejuani stepped up to lead. She was young, she was untested, but she had that true ice flail and the Winter's Claw philosophy burned into her soul. Strength is everything, weakness is death, and if you want to survive, you take what you need. She rides a giant boar named Bristle, which is honestly the most Freljordian thing ever. Not a horse, not a wolf. A massive war boar that can gore through enemies like a fed Olaf going through a backline. Sejuani and Bristle are bonded, practically inseparable, and together they're a nightmare on the battlefield. She wields her true ice flail with precision and brutality, freezing enemies mid-charge, shattering them with follow-up strikes. And she has exactly zero chill when it comes to combat. Is she wrong for thinking strength is the only way to survive? In the Freljord, maybe not. But it does make family reunions with Ash incredibly awkward since they're technically relatives who are now enemies. Imagine Thanksgiving dinner, except everyone's armed with magical ice weapons and one wrong word could start a war. Let me tell you about the most griefing long con in League history. Lysandra has been alive for thousands of years, and she spent every single one of them lying her ass off about what really happened with the Watchers. She's out here pretending to be a wise leader and protector of the Freljord, while secretly maintaining the ice prison that keeps the Watchers sealed. It's like being the imposter in Among Us, except the game's been going for literal centuries, and somehow no one's voted you out yet. She's manipulated entire bloodlines, erased history, and even turned some of her own followers into the Frozen Watchers. Those creepy ice thralls you fight in the lore. Every day, Lysandra wakes up and has to maintain the lie. She has to pretend everything's fine. She has to keep people from digging too deep into the past. When archaeologists or historians get too curious about the ancient war, she either redirects them or makes them disappear. When someone discovers evidence of her betrayal, that evidence mysteriously gets destroyed. She's been doing this for millennia, and it's exhausting. But she can't stop because if the truth comes out, if people learn she's the reason the Watchers almost destroyed everything, her entire regime collapses. The Frostguard, her loyal followers, would turn on her. The tribes would unite against her. And worst of all, someone might accidentally weaken the prison while trying to punish her, releasing the Watchers she spent thousands of years keeping sealed. And the worst part, she can't even die. She took immortality as part of her deal with the Watchers, which means she's trapped in this existence forever. No retirement, no peaceful end, just endless years of covering up mistakes, maintaining lies, and keeping the apocalypse frozen beneath the ice. She's seen civilizations rise and fall. She's watched generations of Freljordians live and die while she remains, unchanging, eternal, alone. Every time someone gets close to the truth, Lysandra either freezes them, manipulates them, or rewrites history. She's turned her most loyal followers into the Frozen Watchers, stripping them of their humanity and turning them into ice thralls, all to maintain her army and her secrets. It's the ultimate sunk cost fallacy. She's done so many terrible things to cover up her original terrible thing that stopping now would make it all meaningless. So she keeps going, keeps lying, keeps hoping that maybe the ice will hold for another 1,000 years. Alright, so Tryndamere is what happens when someone's rage literally becomes their superpower. His entire tribe got massacred by mysterious forces. Spoiler, probably connected to the Watchers or Lysandra's schemes, and he survived purely through being too angry to accept death. We're talking about a guy whose ultimate ability in game is literally I refuse to die for 5 seconds, which is just his actual lore translated into gameplay. He's running around with a massive sword, challenging anything that moves to combat, and married to Ashe in what's probably the most interesting political marriage in the Freljord. Tryndamere's backstory is pure trauma converted into combat effectiveness. Imagine coming home to find your entire tribe slaughtered, your people dead, everything you knew destroyed. Most people would break. Tryndamere got angry, not regular angry. We're talking about rage so intense it bent reality around him. In that moment of absolute despair and fury, something awakened in him. Some connection to ancient power, some refusal of death itself, and suddenly he's standing in the ruins of his village with a sword in his hand and the ability to just not die when he should. It's like having Guardian Angel as a passive, except it's fueled by pure, unfiltered rage and trauma. He eventually meets Ashe, and instead of the expected barbarian meets diplomat disaster, they actually work together. She needs his strength and his warriors. He needs her structure and her vision for a united Freljord. They get married, combining their tribes, and somehow make it functional. Because while Ashe is trying to unite people through diplomacy, Tryndamere's solution to most problems involves hitting them really hard until they stop being problems. He's basically that top laner who's 0-5 but refuses to FF because he knows he scales. Except in this case, his scaling is fueled by pure, unfiltered rage and trauma. And honestly, in the Freljord, that might be the most relatable survival strategy. Could be worse. You could be the tribe that got massacred while Tryndamere was out hunting. At least he came back, even if what came back was more rage than man. Now here's where we take a break from all the tragedy and talk about Braum, the one person in the Freljord who isn't completely traumatized or trying to conquer something. Braum is basically that one teammate who's still positive in all chat, even when your team's getting stomped. He's got a magical door shield made of true ice, a mustache that could inspire hope in even the most doomed promo series, and he genuinely just wants to help people. His lore is full of stories about him saving children, protecting villages, and being an absolute unit of wholesomeness in a region defined by suffering. The story of how Braum got his shield is peak Freljordian insanity. There was a young troll boy trapped in a burning building, or freezing building actually, since this is the Freljord, and fire's not really the main problem. The entrance was blocked by a massive vault door made of true ice. Nobody could open it. The boy was going to die. And Braum, being Braum, punched straight through the ice and tore the door off its hinges with his bare hands. Then he used the door as a shield and has been carrying it ever since. That's not metaphorical. He literally ripped a true ice door off its frame through pure strength and determination, and now it's his signature weapon. It's the most absurdly wholesome origin story for a legendary item ever. Braum treats his Poro friends better than most people treat their duo partners. He protects villages from raids not because he wants political power, but because protecting people is just what you do. He tells stories to children. He helps elderly folks carry supplies. He's genuinely, unironically kind in a place where kindness is usually weakness. And somehow, he survived. Maybe it's because even in the Freljord, people recognize that Braum's too pure to attack. Maybe it's because anyone who tries to fight him gets blocked by an indestructible true ice door and punched into next week by a guy who can tear through ice with his bare hands. Either way, Braum is proof that not everyone in the Freljord has to be a traumatized warrior or scheming villain. Sometimes you can just be a really good guy with a door. Is his optimism realistic in a frozen wasteland? Probably not. But is it inspiring? Absolutely. Let's talk about the Winter's Claw's whole deal, because their philosophy is basically, if you can't handle the Freljord at its worst, you don't deserve the Freljord at its, well, it's always at its worst, but you get the idea. Sejuani's tribe believes that strength is the only thing that matters, that the weak should be left to freeze, and that mercy is just slow death. It sounds harsh, but when you're living in a place where going outside without proper gear means you'll die in minutes, maybe they have a point. The Winter's Claw doesn't do charity. They don't do handouts. If you can't contribute, if you can't fight, if you slow down the tribe, you get left behind. It's brutal efficiency in its purest form. The Winter's Claw lifestyle is basically hardcore mode survival. They raid other tribes not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. They take food, supplies, weapons, whatever they need to survive another winter. They don't apologize for it. They don't feel guilty. Because in their worldview, either you're strong enough to defend what's yours, or you don't deserve to keep it. It's like being hard stuck in low elo and realizing you have to 1v9 every game, because you can't trust anyone else to carry. The Winter's Claw are the players who never surrender, who fight until the Nexus explodes, who refuse to accept defeat even when the odds are impossible. They've survived in the harshest parts of the Freljord by being harder than everything trying to kill them. And when you compare their results to Ash's diplomatic approach, you have to wonder, who's actually right? The Avarosans talk about unity, but they're spread thin trying to protect everyone. The Winter's Claw are concentrated, efficient, and incredibly effective at surviving. They're not building a nation. They're building an army. They're not trying to win hearts and minds. They're trying to not freeze to death. Is it sustainable long term? Maybe not. But in the short term, they're absolutely dominating their region through sheer force of will and complete unwillingness to accept weakness. It's not evil. It's adaptation to an environment so brutal that compassion feels like a liability. And when your competition is literal void monsters and eternal winter, maybe being ruthless isn't wrong. Maybe it's the only thing that works. Now let's talk about what Ash and the Avarosan tribe are actually trying to accomplish, because it's either the most noble goal in Runeterra or the most optimistic delusion since someone said we can still win this while down 20 kills. The Avarosans believe the Freljord can be united under one banner, that tribes can cooperate instead of constantly fighting, and that maybe, just maybe, they can build something better than an endless cycle of raids and survival. It's a beautiful idea. It's also incredibly difficult when half the region thinks you're weak for not immediately attacking everyone, and the other half is literally hiding world-ending secrets. The Avarosan approach is slow. It requires building trust with tribes that have been enemies for generations. It means sharing resources when you barely have enough for yourself. It means taking risks on people who might betray you the moment it's convenient. Ash is essentially asking Freljordians to bet their survival on cooperation, and that's a hard sell when the traditional strategy of steal from your enemies has worked for thousands of years. But here's the thing. The Avarosans are actually growing, slowly, painfully, with setbacks every other week, but they're growing. Tribes are joining. People are starting to believe that maybe there's another way. Maybe the Freljord doesn't have to be a perpetual battle royale. The challenge is proving it works before someone proves it doesn't. Every time a tribe joins the Avarosans and then gets raided by the Winter's Claw, it damages Ash's credibility. Every time she chooses diplomacy over retaliation, someone calls her weak. Every time she shares resources instead of hoarding them, her own people question whether she's fit to lead. Ash is basically playing support in a game where everyone else wants to be the carry, and somehow she's still keeping the team together. She's shot calling, she's protecting, she's enabling everyone else to succeed, and getting flamed for it half the time. Can it work? Maybe. But it requires everyone to agree that survival is better than glory, and in the Freljord that's the hardest sell imaginable. Still, she persists. Because what else is she going to do? Give up and let the region tear itself apart? That's not how Avarosans operate. Okay, so this next part, absolutely unhinged. Volibear isn't just some angry bear spirit. He's a literal god of storm and war who thinks civilization is the worst thing that ever happened to the Freljord. He's basically that one player who refuses to adapt to the meta and insists the old ways were better. Volibear represents the primal, savage nature of the Freljord before humans tried to build tribes and cities. He watched the region evolve over millennia, watched people build communities, develop culture, create technology, and hated every second of it. In his view, the Freljord was perfect when it was just brutal survival, when strength was the only law, when every day was a fight and the weak simply died. Volibear has a special hatred for his brother Ornn, because Ornn taught humans to craft, to build, to improve their lives beyond simple survival. To Volibear, this is the ultimate betrayal. Teaching humans to forge weapons and tools, to build shelters and forges, to master their environment instead of being mastered by it. This goes against everything Volibear believes. He wants the Freljord to be pure, primal, unchanged. He wants humans to struggle, to fight, to prove their worth through violence and endurance. Any sign of comfort, any hint of progress, any attempt to make life easier is weakness in his eyes. And Volibear has zero tolerance for weakness. He's got a cult of followers called the Ursine who share his philosophy. They raid villages not for resources, but to destroy anything that looks too civilized. They burn down buildings, smash forges, kill anyone who represents progress or comfort. It's like if a raid boss gained consciousness and decided its purpose was to grief anyone trying to build something. The Ursine paint themselves with blood and bear imagery, fight with savage brutality, and genuinely believe they're serving a higher purpose by keeping the Freljord wild. Volibear himself is a walking storm, lightning and thunder and raw elemental fury. When he appears on the battlefield, it's not to conquer, it's to destroy, to remind everyone that nature is stronger than civilization. Is he wrong? Debatable. Is he a raid boss level threat to anyone trying to unite the region? Absolutely. And that's exactly how he likes it. Let me tell you about Ornn. Volibear's brother and the only god in the Freljord who just wants to be left alone to make cool stuff. While Volibear's out here starting wars and smiting anyone who builds a house, Ornn is in his forge creating legendary weapons and teaching mortals how to craft. He's basically that one player who mains the same champion for 1,000 games, perfects their craft, and doesn't engage with drama. Ornn is the reason the Freljordians have metalworking, proper tools, and weapons that aren't just sharpened rocks. He saw humans struggling to survive in the frozen wasteland and thought, I could help with that, and actually did. Ornn's forge is hidden somewhere in the mountains, and he works alone because social interaction is exhausting and people are generally annoying. He crafts masterwork items, weapons that never break, armor that never fails, tools that last generations. Sometimes, if someone proves themselves worthy, Ornn will craft something for them personally. These items become legendary. They get passed down through bloodlines, fought over in wars, treated as sacred relics. And Ornn doesn't want worship for this. He doesn't want glory or recognition. He just wants to craft in peace, to perfect his technique, to create things of lasting value. It's honestly the healthiest relationship with work and purpose any League character has. But because this is the Freljord, even the Chill God gets dragged into conflict. Volibear's rampage against civilization puts them on opposite sides. Their followers fight, their philosophies clash, and Ornn, who just wants to forge in peace, occasionally has to leave his mountain, pick up his hammer, and defend what he's built. He doesn't enjoy it. He'd much rather be working on his next masterpiece. But when your brother's a storm god destroying everything you've taught humans to create, eventually you have to step in. Respect to Ornn for being the only god with a healthy work-life balance and still managing to be relevant to the plot. He's carrying the Freljord's technological advancement on his shoulders, and he's doing it without asking for credit or worship. If only the rest of the region could be that reasonable. Now let's talk about Anivia, the immortal ice bird, who's basically the Freljord's oldest observer and occasional savior. She's a spirit of the land itself, reborn every time she dies, and she's been watching the Freljord's drama unfold for thousands of years. Imagine being an immortal being who has to watch the same mistakes happen over and over, tribes fighting, leaders rising and falling, the Watchers threatening reality, and nobody ever learning from history. That's Anivia's existence. She helps when she can, guides those worthy, and occasionally freezes threats into oblivion. But she can't force mortals to unite or make better choices. Anivia's cycle of death and rebirth means she's witnessed every major event in Freljordian history. She was there when the Three Sisters ruled. She saw the Watchers' invasion. She watched Lyssandra's betrayal and the sealing of the Howling Abyss. She's seen countless wars, famines, and frozen winters, and through it all, she's tried to guide the Freljord towards something better when a leader proves themselves worthy. When someone shows genuine care for their people and the land, Anivia might appear to them, offering wisdom or assistance. But most Freljordians never see her. She's like that high elo player who smurfs in your game, hard carries, gives you advice in chat, and then disappears, knowing you'll probably go back to making the same mistakes. Anivia represents the Freljord's potential, the hope that maybe one day the tribes will actually work together, that the endless cycle of violence might break, that something lasting and good might be built. But after millennia of watching them fail, even she's probably getting tired. She still helps. She still protects. She still guides. But you can imagine the exhaustion of being immortal in a region that refuses to learn. Every generation thinks they're different, that they'll be the ones to finally fix everything. And every generation falls into the same patterns: raiding, fighting, conquering, betraying. Anivia watches it all, dies, is reborn, and watches it happen again. If that's not the definition of eternal suffering, I don't know what is. At least, when she dies, She gets a brief respite before being reborn into the same frozen chaos. Alright, so the frozen watchers aren't the watchers from the void. They're what Lysandra turns her most loyal followers into, which is somehow even more messed up. When someone serves Lysandra faithfully, when they prove themselves completely devoted to her cause, she rewards them by turning them into immortal ice thralls with no free will. It's like getting to Challenger and then realizing the prize is being stuck in Challenger forever with no way to quit the game. These frozen watchers are scattered across the Freljord, mindlessly serving Lysandra's commands, trapped in ice for eternity. They can't die, can't rest, can't even think for themselves. They're just frozen soldiers in an endless war. The process is horrific. Lysandra takes someone who trusts her, who believes in her mission, and uses her dark ice magic to freeze them from the inside out. Their bodies become ice, their minds become enslaved, their humanity gets stripped away until all that's left is a thrall that obeys commands without question. And the worst part? Most of them volunteered for this. They thought they'd be honored heroes, immortalized in service to the Ice Witch. Instead, they became walking war crimes, eternal prisoners in their own frozen bodies. It's the ultimate monkey's paw. You get immortality and power, but you lose everything that makes you human. Lysandra has an entire army of these things, and every single one represents someone who trusted her and got absolutely doomed. She stations them across the Freljord as guards, as soldiers, as enforcers of her will. When threats appear, she wakes them from dormancy and they attack without hesitation or mercy. They're incredibly effective because they don't fear death, don't feel pain, don't question orders. They're the perfect army for someone who needs to maintain control and keep secrets buried. But they're also a constant reminder of Lysandra's cruelty, of how far she'll go to maintain her lies. Every frozen watcher used to be a person with hopes, dreams, relationships. Now they're just ice sculptures that murder people on command. And Lysandra sleeps fine knowing this. Because after thousands of years of covering up her betrayal, what's a few hundred more victims? So here's where we are. Ash wants unity, Sejuani wants conquest, Lysandra's hiding apocalyptic secrets, Volibear wants to delete civilization, and the Watchers are still sealed beneath the ice, waiting for someone to accidentally free them. The Freljord is basically one bad decision away from either becoming a united nation or unleashing the void on Runeterra. Every faction thinks they're right. Every leader has a valid reason for their approach, and nobody knows that the biggest threat isn't each other. It's the frozen prison under the howling abyss that's probably not going to hold forever. The cracks are showing, literally. The ice prison is weakening. Every few decades, there's a tremor. Every few centuries, something pushes through before getting frozen again. Lysandra knows this better than anyone because she's the one maintaining the seal, and it's taking more power every year. Eventually, she won't be able to hold it. Eventually, the Watchers will break free. And when they do, all the political drama, all the tribal conflicts, all the philosophical differences about how to rule the Freljord will become instantly irrelevant because everyone will be too busy getting deleted from existence. Can Ash unite the tribes before it's too late? Can Sejuani's strength actually save people when the real threat emerges? Can Lysandra keep her secrets buried for another 1,000 years? Or will someone finally discover the truth and expose her? Will Volibear's desire to destroy civilization accidentally help when fighting the Watchers, or will it make everything worse? Is there any scenario where the Freljord actually wins, or are they doomed to repeat the same conflicts until reality itself breaks? It's like watching a ranked game where everyone's playing their own strategy, nobody's communicating, and the enemy nexus is about to explode. Except in this case, the nexus is reality itself, and there's no surrender option. The Freljord is a region defined by survival against impossible odds, by people who refuse to give up even when everything's telling them to. But surviving isn't the same as winning. The tribes are so busy fighting each other that they're ignoring the real apocalypse waiting beneath the ice. And maybe that's the most tragic part. Not that they might fail, but that they're failing while convinced they're succeeding. Every faction believes they're making the right choice. Every leader thinks they're saving their people. And meanwhile, the Watchers are just waiting, patient, eternal, knowing that eventually the ice will crack. Could be tomorrow, could be 1,000 years from now, but it will crack. And when it does, the Freljord better hope someone figured out how to work together. Because facing the void alone, that's how you get deleted from existence. Just ask Lysandra. She knows better than anyone. The thing about the Freljord that nobody wants to admit is that it's been broken since the beginning. Like, fundamentally broken. Not, we need a few patches to fix this broken. More like, the entire system is corrupted, and we've been building on a cracked foundation for thousands of years broken. Every tribe, every leader, every faction is trying to solve problems that stem from one catastrophic mistake made millennia ago. And the person who made that mistake? She's still alive, still in power, still pretending everything's fine while the evidence of her betrayal literally howls beneath the ice. It's honestly impressive how long Lysandra's kept this going. Most people can't keep a lie going for a week without cracking. She's been at it for several thousand years and hasn't even flinched. The Frostguard, Lysandra's personal army and cult, are basically the enforcer arm of her eternal cover-up operation. They're not just soldiers. They're true believers who think they're serving a noble cause. Lysandra's convinced them that she's protecting the Freljord from ancient threats, which is technically true, except she's leaving out the part where she's the reason those threats exist in the first place. The Frostguard patrol the frozen wastes, eliminate anyone who gets too curious about history, and maintain Lysandra's ice structures across the region. They're efficient, they're loyal, and they have absolutely no idea they're working for the villain. It's like being in a guild run by someone who's secretly been ninja looting the entire time, except instead of gear, they're stealing the truth about reality-ending void monsters. What makes the Frostguard especially dangerous is that they genuinely believe their mission is righteous. They're not mercenaries who can be bought, or soldiers who follow orders reluctantly. They're zealots. When they hunt down historians trying to piece together the true story of the Watchers, they think they're preventing dangerous knowledge from spreading. When they destroy ancient texts that mention Lysandra's betrayal, they believe they're protecting the Freljord's stability. Lysandra's crafted a perfect narrative where she's the eternal guardian, the wise leader who's seen everything and knows what's best. And the Frostguard buy it completely. They die for her. Some of them do die for her, and then she turns them into frozen Watchers as a reward. It's the ultimate pyramid scheme, except the prize at the top is getting your consciousness deleted and your body turned into an ice puppet. The Frostguard also serve another purpose. They're Lysandra's eyes and ears across the entire Freljord. Every major tribe, every significant settlement, every strategic location has Frostguard agents embedded or nearby. They report back on political movements, military developments, and anything that might threaten Lysandra's control. When Ash started gaining followers and building her coalition, Lysandra knew about it immediately. When Sejuani's Winter's Claw began their aggressive expansion, the Frostguard had detailed reports within days. Lysandra doesn't just rule through ice magic, she rules through information. And the Frostguard are her information network, completely unaware that their leader is the biggest threat to the Freljord's survival. Could be worse though. Could be getting ganked by an invisible Shaco. At least the Frostguard are visible most of the time. Now let's talk about Gregor and the Avarosan traditions, because Ash didn't just inherit a bow. She inherited an entire cultural legacy that's equal parts inspiring and exhausting. The Avarosans don't just follow Ash because she's strong, or because she's iceborn. They follow her because she represents the dream that Avarosa died for, thousands of years ago. Every decision Ash makes gets measured against what would Avarosa do, which is like being asked what would your most perfect ancestor do, every single day of your life. No pressure, just casual comparison to a legendary hero every time you make a political decision. The Avarosan way is built on pillars of unity, compassion, and collective strength. It's beautiful in theory. In practice, it means Ash has to make choices that often disadvantage her own people in the short term for the sake of long-term unity. The Avarosans have these ceremonies and traditions passed down through generations. The Rite of Unity, where tribes formally join the coalition. The Winter's Bounty, where resources are shared equally among member tribes, regardless of who gathered them. The Council of Voices, where every tribe gets representation in major decisions. These traditions are designed to build trust and cooperation, to prove that the Avarosan way isn't just about one leader commanding everyone. But maintaining these traditions requires constant effort. Every tribe that joins expects these rituals to be honored. Every promise made in ceremony has to be kept. If Ash breaks tradition even once for practical reasons, it damages the entire foundation of trust she's built. It's like being the shot caller in a ranked game, where every teammate is watching your every move, waiting for you to make a mistake so they can say, "See, I knew this wouldn't work." And the thing is, traditions can be a weakness. When the Winter's Claw raids an Avarosan village, Ash can't just immediately retaliate because the Council of Voices has to convene and decide on a unified response. By the time they've reached consensus, Sejuani's already 3 raids ahead. When resources are running low, Ash can't hoard supplies for her strongest warriors because the Winter's Bounty demands equal distribution. So everyone gets a little less, which means everyone's a little weaker. The Avarosan way requires sacrifice from those who could dominate through strength alone. It asks the powerful to be gentle and the strong to be patient. And in the Freljord, where being gentle can get you killed and being patient can mean starving through winter, those asks are incredibly difficult. But Ash persists, because if she abandons the traditions, she's just another warlord with a fancy bow, and the Freljord has enough of those already. Sejuani's relationship with her mother is basically a masterclass in how to give your child lifelong trauma while also making them incredibly effective at warfare. Kalkia, Sejuani's mother, was the war mother of the Winter's Claw before her, and by all accounts, she was absolutely terrifying. She led through pure intimidation and strength, and she raised Sejuani the same way. No affection without achievement, no comfort without conquest. Sejuani's childhood was a constant test where failure meant shame and success meant getting to eat that night. It's like being raised by a coach who only cares about your KDA and flames you every time you die, except instead of losing LP, you might literally freeze to death. Kalkia taught Sejuani that emotions are weaknesses to be controlled, that mercy is just slow defeat, and that the only way to survive is to be harder than everything trying to kill you. She took young Sejuani on raids, made her watch executions, forced her to make impossible choices between survival and compassion. And Sejuani learned. She absorbed every lesson, internalized every harsh truth. When other children were playing, Sejuani was training. When other tribes were celebrating, the Winter's Claw was preparing for the next battle. Kalkia wasn't trying to be cruel. She genuinely believed this was the only way to prepare her daughter for leadership in the harshest region of Runeterra. And in a way, she was right. Sejuani survived. She became strong. She inherited the Winter's Claw and led them to greater strength than they'd known in generations. But the cost was Sejuani's ability to trust, to show vulnerability, to believe in anything beyond strength and survival. When Kalkia eventually died, probably in some glorious combat because peaceful deaths aren't a Winter's Claw thing, Sejuani didn't grieve in any traditional sense. She just became the next war mother and continued the cycle. She leads exactly how her mother taught her, with the same harsh philosophy, the same unyielding standards, and somewhere deep down, probably buried under layers of ice and trauma, Sejuani knows she's perpetuating the same painful childhood she endured. But changing would mean admitting her mother was wrong. And if her mother was wrong, then all that suffering was meaningless. So Sejuani keeps going, keeps pushing, keeps being the war mother her mother made her. It's the Freljordian equivalent of being hard stuck in your playstyle because it's the only thing you know, even when you suspect there might be better strategies. Let's talk about Nunu and Willump because they represent something the Freljord desperately needs but constantly rejects: innocent hope and genuine friendship. Nunu's a kid, literally just a child with a flute and dreams of adventure. Willump's a yeti, a massive, powerful yeti, but one with a gentle heart. Together, they traveled the Freljord having adventures, helping people, and generally being wholesome in a region that specializes in the opposite. They're like that duo in Ranked who's genuinely having fun while everyone else is tilted and flaming. Their story is important because it proves the Freljord doesn't have to be all suffering and war. People can still be kind. Friendships can still form across species barriers. Adventure and joy can exist even in the frozen wastes. Nunu's mother told him stories of heroes before she died, stories of Avarosa, of legendary warriors, of the Freljord's better days. And instead of letting grief break him, Nunu decided to become a hero. Himself, he found Willump, bonded with him, and started traveling the region helping whoever needs it. They stop raiders, they save lost travelers, they even confront Lysandra's forces when necessary. And they do it all without cynicism, without ulterior motives, without any of the political baggage that weighs down every other faction. Nunu genuinely believes the Freljord can be better, and Willump follows him because their friendship is pure and unconditional. But here's the sad part. Most Freljordians don't know what to do with this. A child and a yeti traveling around helping people? It doesn't fit into anyone's worldview. The Avarosans appreciate them, but don't fully understand them. The Winter's Claw sees them as soft targets. Lysandra's forces hunt them because Nunu's asking too many questions about history and ancient magic. Nunu and Willump exist in this space between all the political factions, representing what the Freljord could be if everyone stopped fighting long enough to remember that kindness is possible. They're proof that not everyone has to choose between Ash's diplomacy and Sejuani's strength, that maybe there's a third option nobody's considered, just being good to each other. Revolutionary concept, I know, but in the Freljord, it might as well be suggesting everyone just FF at 15 and play a different game entirely. Alright, so we need to talk about the Ursine and what they actually do beyond just worship Volibear and destroy things. Because the Ursine aren't just random raiders, they're a religious movement dedicated to returning the Freljord to its primal state. They believe civilization is a disease, that progress is corruption, and that the only pure existence is constant struggle against nature. When the Ursine attack a village, they're not looking for resources or territory. They're trying to save you from the weakness of comfort. It's like having a raid boss whose motivation is making sure you never leave Elo hell because they think struggle builds character. Thanks, we hate it. The Ursine marked themselves with bear claws and blood. They paint their bodies with symbols meant to honor Volibear. They reject any technology more advanced than basic weapons and furs. Forges, burned. Written language, destroyed. Any kind of architectural advancement, torn down. They live in caves and temporary shelters, constantly moving, constantly hunting, constantly fighting. It's the most extreme form of rejection of modernity possible. And they're incredibly effective at it because they're not held back by supply lines, political considerations, or concern for casualties. An Ursine warrior fights until they die, and they consider death in service to Volibear the highest honor possible. What makes them especially terrifying is that they're not wrong about some things. The Ursine correctly point out that civilized Freljordians have grown dependent on things that can be taken away. Cities can be conquered. Forges can be destroyed. Written knowledge can be burned. But the Ursine carry everything they need with them, their strength, their faith, their willingness to endure any hardship. They're anti-fragile in a way that settled societies can never be. When winter comes and villages starve, the Ursine just hunt more aggressively. When diseases spread through crowded settlements, the Ursine remains scattered and healthy. They've optimized for survival in the absolute worst conditions, and they've done it by rejecting everything that makes life worth living. It's like voluntarily staying in bronze because you think the real challenge is climbing from there every season. Technically impressive, definitely hardcore, but also why though? Now here's something most people don't know. There are Freljordians who aren't aligned with any major faction, and they're arguably having the worst time of anyone. These are the isolated villages, the hermit clans, the refugee groups displaced by war. They're not strong enough to join the Winter's Claw. They're too scattered to benefit from Avarosan protection. They're too remote for Lysandra to bother controlling. And they're definitely not radical enough to join the Ursine. So they just exist in the frozen spaces between powers, trying to survive without the backing of any army or god or legendary leader. It's the Freljordian equivalent of being unranked in a game where everyone else is at least trying to climb. These independent groups face threats from every direction. The Winter's Claw raids them for supplies. The Ursine attacks them for being too civilized. Lysandra's agents occasionally sweep through looking for anyone who knows too much about history. Wild animals hunt them. The weather tries to kill them daily, and they have no recourse, no backup, no powerful allies to call on. When their hunters don't return, there's no search party. When their food stores run low, there's no trade agreement to fall back on. They survive through pure stubbornness and the hope that maybe, eventually, someone will unite the Freljord and they'll finally be safe. Some of them pray to Anivia. Some worship the old gods. Some have given up on divine intervention entirely and just focus on making it through each day. These are the people Ash is trying to protect, even though many of them will never know her name. They're the reason the Avarosan coalition matters, because without it, they'd have no hope at all. But they're also proof of how much work remains. For every tribe that joins Ash's coalition, there are dozens more scattered across the Freljord who haven't even heard about it. The Freljord is massive, and communication across frozen wastes is nearly impossible. So these isolated groups continue their daily struggle, fighting for survival in a region that's forgotten they exist. If that's not the definition of playing a game where nobody's paying attention to your lane and you just have to 1v2 forever, I don't know what is. At least, when you die in League, you respawn. In the Freljord, you just die. Let's talk about the relationship between the demigods and mortals in the Freljord, because it's complicated in ways that would make a ranked duo's communication look simple. You've got Volibear who wants to delete civilization, Ornan who wants to help but mostly wants to be left alone, and Anivia who guides but can't intervene directly. Then there's mortals who worship these beings, reject them, or try to use them for political power. It's like having three different coaches all giving contradictory advice while you're trying to play the game, except the coaches are immortal gods who could kill you instantly if they wanted. Communication's going great, as you can imagine. The Freljordians who worship Volibear believe they're serving the true spirit of their homeland. They see the Ursine's destruction of civilization as necessary purification. Meanwhile, the craftspeople and builders who follow Ornn's teachings think they're honoring the land by improving it, by creating lasting works that will shelter future generations. And the tribes who revere Anivia see her as the truest representation of the Freljord soul, patient, enduring, protective, but not controlling. None of these groups think they're wrong. All of them believe their god represents the right path forward. And the gods themselves? They're not exactly stepping in to clarify things. Volibear occasionally manifests as a living storm to destroy something that offends him. Ornan very rarely leaves his forge, but has been known to help mortals who prove themselves worthy. Anivia appears when the land itself is threatened, but she doesn't take sides in political conflicts. So mortals are left to interpret the will of gods based on occasional dramatic appearances and a lot of speculation. It's like getting a ping from your jungler, but no follow-up communication. You know they want something, but what exactly? Who knows? Better just guess and hope you're right. Except if you guess wrong about a god's will, consequences are significantly worse than a lost ranked game. This theological confusion feeds into the political chaos. Ashe can't fully commit to any god because she needs to unite tribes that worship different beings. Sejuani respects strength in all forms, but doesn't really worship anyone. She's too busy surviving to worry about divine favor. Lysandra pretends to honor the old ways while secretly knowing more about the true history of the region than any god would want mortals to know. And all of them have to navigate a religious landscape where choosing the wrong deity to honor can alienate entire tribes. It's political chess, except some of the pieces are actual immortal beings who might flip the board if they don't like your moves. Here's something that keeps Lysandra awake at night. Well, she doesn't really sleep, but you get the idea. The fact that people are getting close to the truth. Not one person, but multiple people from different directions. Archaeologists finding ruins that contradict official history. Shamans having visions that show glimpses of the true past. Travelers stumbling onto ancient sites where reality still feels thin and wrong. Every generation, someone gets close enough to the truth that Lysandra has to intervene, and it's getting harder. Because information spreads now, stories travel, and even in the Freljord people talk. There's a scholar in one of the Avarosan settlements who's been collecting oral histories from the oldest families. She's noticed inconsistencies in the legends about the Watchers. Different tribes tell the story differently, but there are common elements that don't match what Lysandra's Frostguard claims. This scholar hasn't put all the pieces together yet, but she's getting close to realizing that something major has been erased from history. Lysandra knows about her. The Frostguard has agents watching her. The question is, does Lysandra eliminate her and risk drawing attention, or does she let the investigation continue and hope it hits a dead end? It's the ultimate griefing dilemma. Deal with the threat now and potentially expose yourself, or wait and hope it resolves on its own. Then there's a group of young iceborn warriors who've been exploring the deep ice caves beneath the howling abyss. They're not historians or scholars, they're just adventurers looking for ancient weapons and glory. But they've found carvings, symbols, ice formations that don't occur naturally, and they've heard sounds coming from deeper in the caves, sounds that don't match anything else in the Freljord. They think they found some kind of ancient armory or hidden treasure. They have no idea they're excavating the prison that holds reality-ending void monsters. Lysandra's monitoring them too, ready to seal off their dig site or worse if they get too close. It's like watching someone accidentally walk toward Barren Pit when the enemy team is doing it. You know disaster's about to happen, but they're completely oblivious. And worst of all, Ash has been asking questions. Not directly about the Watchers. She doesn't know to ask about them specifically, but she's been researching Avarosa's life, trying to understand her ancestors' vision for the Freljord. And the more she learns, the more she notices gaps in the historical record, entire decades missing from the timeline, contradictions in how the Great War ended, references to a third sister that nobody talks about. Ash is too smart and too thorough to just accept these inconsistencies. She's going to keep digging. And when she does, when she finally uncovers the truth about Lyssandra's betrayal, about what's sealed beneath the ice, about how precarious the Freljord's existence really is, that's when everything changes. Lysandra can feel it coming. It's like watching your Nexus health drop while you're dead and knowing you can't stop the end. The truth is going to come out. It's just a matter of when. Let's talk about what happens when different factions accidentally collide, because the Freljord's not big enough for everyone to avoid each other forever. Sometimes Winter's Claw warriors raid a village that's under Avarosan protection, and suddenly Sejuani and Ash's forces are fighting despite neither of them wanting a full war yet. Sometimes the Ursine attack an isolated settlement that happens to be near a Frostguard outpost, and Lyssandra's agents have to defend people they'd normally ignore. These accidental confrontations reveal truths about each faction that carefully managed political posturing usually hides. When the Winter's Claw fights the Avarosans, you see the difference in tactics. Immediately, Winter's Claw hits hard and fast, prioritizing targets that will break enemy morale. They aim for leaders, for supply lines, for anything that will make the defense crumble. The Avarosans fight defensively, trying to minimize casualties on both sides, still hoping for eventual reconciliation. They take prisoners instead of executing. They offer surrender terms instead of fighting to the death. And to the Winter's Claw, this looks like weakness. To the Avarosans, the Winter's Claw's brutality looks like unnecessary cruelty. Both sides walk away from these skirmishes convinced the other faction is fundamentally wrong. When the Ursine clash with Lyssandra's Frostguard, it's chaos versus order. The Ursine fight with savage unpredictability, using terrain and ferocity to overwhelm opponents. The Frostguard fight with coordinated precision, using ice magic and tactical formations. Neither side takes prisoners. Neither side shows mercy. These battles are ugly and absolute, and they usually end with most participants dead. The few survivors carry back tales that fuel propaganda on both sides. The Ursine claim the Frostguard are soulless ice puppets serving a false leader, while the Frostguard insists the Ursine are mindless savages who've abandoned reason. Both narratives are partially true, which makes them effective. The real tragedy is when neutral parties get caught in these conflicts. A village that's sworn to no faction gets raided by the Winter's Claw, then liberated by the Avarosans who expect gratitude and alliance, then attacked by the Ursine who see the Avarosan presence as proof of civilization's corruption, then seized by the Frostguard who want to prevent the chaos from spreading. By the end, the village is destroyed, its people scattered or dead, and every faction claims their actions were necessary and justified. It's the Freljordian equivalent of playing a game where every lane is feeding and nobody's communicating, except the cost isn't LP. It's lives. And it happens over and over in different places, with different specific circumstances, but the same fundamental tragedy. Nobody's winning. Everyone's losing. And the Watchers beneath the ice are probably laughing, if they had mouths, or emotions, or any positive feelings about existence. The thing about living in the Freljord that nobody really captures in the stories is just how exhausting it is. Not the exciting kind of exhausting where you're fighting epic battles and making legendary plays. The boring, grinding, soul-crushing exhausting of just existing in a place that's actively trying to kill you every single day. You wake up cold. You go to sleep cold. Everything in between is managing that cold, finding food that isn't frozen solid, making sure your shelter hasn't collapsed under snow, and hoping today isn't the day a Yeti wanders into camp or raiders decide your tribe looks like an easy target. It's like being stuck in the longest, most tedious ranked game of your life, except you can't surrender, and the only win condition is don't die today. Tomorrow you get to do it all again. The daily grind affects everything. It's why Sejuani's philosophy resonates with so many people. Because when you're spending 90% of your energy just surviving, the idea of also being diplomatically patient sounds impossible. You don't have the luxury of long-term planning when you're not sure you'll survive the next storm. The Winter's Clause approach of take what you need, don't apologize, move fast and stay strong makes perfect sense when your alternative is freezing to death while waiting for a diplomatic solution. It's brutal, but it's efficient. And in the Freljord, efficiency often means the difference between survival and becoming a frozen corpse that other travelers loot for supplies next spring. But this exhaustion also explains why Ash's message is powerful to those who hear it. Because imagine being told, what if you didn't have to fight alone anymore? What if winters could be survived through cooperation instead of constant raiding? What if you could actually rest occasionally without worrying that showing any weakness will get you killed? For people who've never experienced safety or stability, the Avarosan dream sounds like a fantasy. But it's a beautiful fantasy. It's hope in a region that's historically run on desperation. The challenge is that hope doesn't keep you warm at night, and it doesn't fill your stomach when food's scarce. So Ash has to deliver actual results, actual improvements to people's lives, or her message becomes just another story people tell while they're freezing. The Freljord's weather isn't just cold, it's malicious. I don't mean literally conscious, though some shamans would argue otherwise. But the storms that roll through aren't normal weather patterns. They're influenced by ancient magic, by the Watcher's sealed presence, by Lyssandra's ice magic, by Volibear's rage, by the general magical catastrophe that this region has become. You can have a clear day turn into a whiteout blizzard in minutes. Temperatures drop so fast that exposed skin freezes before you can find shelter. Winds hit with enough force to throw grown warriors off their feet. And through it all, there's the sense that the land itself is testing you, daring you to survive another day. The old Freljordians, the ones who remember when things were slightly less horrible, talk about how the storms have gotten worse over the centuries. They're not wrong. Every year Lysandra has to use more power to maintain the prison beneath the howling abyss. And every year that power bleeds out into the environment, making the ice colder, the storms fiercer, the land more hostile. The Freljord is slowly becoming uninhabitable, and nobody except Lysandra knows why. Everyone just accepts that this is how things are, how they've always been. They adapt, they endure, they die when they can't do either anymore. It's like playing on a server with progressively worse ping. At some point, the game becomes unplayable. But if the degradation is slow enough, you don't notice until you're already doomed. There are places in the Freljord where reality is just wrong. Spots where the barrier between dimensions never fully healed after the Watcher's invasion. You'll be walking through what looks like normal frozen tundra, and suddenly you're in a zone where gravity feels different, where colors look off, where sounds echo wrong. Time moves strangely in these places. You might spend what feels like an hour and emerge to find days have passed. Or the reverse. You're trapped for what seems like weeks, and you stumble out to find you were only gone for minutes. The locals avoid these areas, mark them with warnings, tell stories about people who wandered in and came back changed. Or didn't come back at all. Lysandra knows where every single one of these reality scars exists. She's mapped them, studied them, and in some cases weaponized them. The Frost Guard uses these zones as natural prisons. Throw someone into an area where time doesn't work right, and they're effectively removed from the timeline without technically being killed. It's efficient and horrifying. Some of Lysandra's earliest enemies are still trapped in temporal bubbles, experiencing the same moment over and over for thousands of years, not aging, not dying, just existing in a frozen instant of time. When Lysandra says someone disappeared, sometimes she means they literally got disappeared from the normal flow of existence. It's the ultimate form of censorship. You don't kill the person, you just remove them from reality itself. Can't spread dangerous truths if you're trapped in a temporal loop experiencing the same second forever. The Freljord also has these massive ice formations that aren't natural. I'm talking about structures the size of mountains, pure ice, geometrically impossible, just sitting there in the frozen wastes. Some of them are older than recorded history. Some appeared overnight during the war against the Watchers, and some are slowly forming right now, growing incrementally year by year. The Freljordians treat them like landmarks. We'll meet at the third spiral, or the hunting grounds past the fractured tower. But they don't question where they came from or why they exist. They're just part of the landscape now, like mountains or rivers in other regions. Except these formations are connected to the prison. They're part of the seal, magical anchors that help Lysandra maintain the barrier keeping the Watchers contained. And they're failing. Slowly, imperceptibly to anyone who isn't specifically looking, but failing nonetheless. Cracks appear in the ice. Strange lights flicker deep within the structures at night. Sometimes you can hear sounds emanating from inside them. Not wind, not ice settling, but something else. Something that sounds almost like breathing. The shamans have noticed. They're getting reports from tribes across the Freljord about the old ice speaking. They don't know what it means, but they know something's changing. Something's waking up. And if you put your hand against one of these ancient ice formations and stand very still, you can feel it. A pulse. Slow, steady, patient. The heartbeat of something that shouldn't have a heartbeat, counting down to the moment it breaks free. Let's talk about the politics of cold, because in the Freljord, even the temperature is political. The Winter's Claw operates in the harshest, coldest regions because they believe surviving there proves their superiority. If you can live where even the ice is cruel, you're worthy. The Avarosans tend to settle in slightly more temperate areas, still frozen, still deadly, but with better access to resources and trade routes. This leads to the Winter's Claw calling them soft, claiming the Avarosans have gone weak by choosing easier living conditions. Meanwhile, the Avarosans point out that strategically choosing survivable locations is smart resource management, not weakness. Both are right, both are wrong, and the argument continues while people freeze. Then there's the Frostguard, who've built their strongholds in places that should be impossible to inhabit. Structures carved into glaciers, fortresses built on ice fields that shift and crack. They survive in these locations because Lysandra's magic protects them, because they have access to ancient knowledge about manipulating ice. But it creates this mystique of invincibility. How can you challenge someone who lives comfortably in conditions that would kill you in hours? The Frostguard's choice of impossible locations is a power move, a constant demonstration that they're operating on a different level than normal Freljordians. It's intimidating, it's effective, and it's expensive in terms of magical energy, which means Lysandra has to spend more power maintaining her people's comfort, which means less power for maintaining the prison. It's a slow bleed of resources for the sake of political theater. The Ursine, of course, reject the entire concept of permanent settlements. They move constantly, following game, avoiding areas that become too dangerous. They adapt to the cold through sheer physical endurance and religious fervor. No magic, no ancient knowledge, just raw survival. And they judge everyone else for needing more. In Ursine philosophy, if you can't survive the cold through personal strength alone, you don't deserve to survive at all. It's the most extreme version of get-good mentality. No excuses, no help, just you versus the environment, and if you lose, you die. There's a purity to it that even their enemies respect, even while they're fighting off Ursine raids on their soft settlements with their weak dependence on shelter and resources. Food in the Freljord is its own nightmare scenario. You can't farm. The ground's frozen solid. You can't gather much. Most plants can't survive here. Hunting works, but game is scarce and dangerous. The animals that survive in the Freljord are either incredibly elusive or strong enough to hunt the hunters. So tribes raid each other for supplies, which perpetuates the cycle of violence, which makes cooperation difficult, which means everyone stays weak and desperate. It's a perfect storm of resource scarcity creating conflict that prevents the cooperation needed to solve the resource scarcity. Ash sees this cycle clearly and knows the only way to break it is unified resource management. But convincing people to share their limited supplies with potential enemies? That requires a level of trust the Freljord hasn't seen since before the Watchers showed up. The Winter's Claw's solution is aggressive hunting and constant raiding. They take what they need when they need it from whoever has it. It keeps them fed and mobile. But it also means they can never settle, never build anything permanent, never develop the infrastructure that could improve life. They're stuck in survival mode forever, which is exactly how Sejuani thinks it should be. The Avarosans try to establish trade networks and food storage systems, sharing surpluses and covering shortages. It works when everyone participates honestly, but one bad actor, one tribe that takes from the network without contributing can collapse the entire system. So Ash has to constantly balance trust with verification, hope with practicality. It's like trying to coordinate a team comp in Champion Select when half the team is trolling and the other half is trying their best, but doesn't really trust each other. The Frostguard, meanwhile, have access to resources nobody else does. Ancient stores of preserved food, magical techniques for growing hardy crops in enchanted greenhouses, trade agreements with regions outside the Freljord that Lyssandra's established over centuries. The Frostguard never starve. They never struggle for supplies. And that abundance is another form of power, another way Lysandra maintains control. Join the Frostguard and your family eats regularly. Oppose the Frostguard and you're on your own against a region designed to kill you. It's not even subtle manipulation. It's just the reality of resource control in a place where resources barely exist. Now let's talk about the children growing up in this absolute disaster of a region, because the next generation of Freljordians is being shaped by trauma and scarcity in ways that guarantee the cycles of violence will continue. Kids in the Winter's Claw learn to fight before they learn to read, assuming they learn to read at all. They watch adults raid other tribes, watch prisoners get executed or enslaved, absorb the message that strength is everything and mercy is death. By the time they're teenagers, they're full participants in the raiding economy, and they can't imagine any other way to live. They're being perfectly optimized for survival in the current Freljord, which means they're being perfectly optimized to perpetuate all the systems keeping the Freljord broken. Avarosan children get a different education, but it's not necessarily better. They're taught about unity and cooperation, about the glory of their ancestor Avarosa, about how they're building something better. But then, they watch their villages get raided by the Winter's Claw. They see their parents die defending Avarosan ideals. They experience the gap between what they're taught, we're all stronger together, and what they live. We keep losing to people who don't believe that. Some of them grow up to be true believers like Ash, convinced that perseverance will eventually win. Others grow cynical, staying avarose because it's what their family chose, but secretly wondering if Sejuani's right about strength being all that matters. Frostguard children are the creepiest because they're being indoctrinated from birth into Lyssandra's cult of lies. They're taught a version of history where Lyssandra's the eternal guardian who's always protected the Freljord from threats. They learn to report anything suspicious, to trust the Ice Witch above their own parents, to see questioning authority as dangerous weakness. By adulthood, they're perfect agents, loyal, capable, and completely convinced they're serving the greater good. They'd die for Lysandra without hesitation because they literally can't imagine a world where she isn't the hero. It's indoctrination so complete that even if you showed them evidence of Lysandra's betrayal, they'd assume the evidence was fake before questioning their leader. And then there are the children in unaffiliated tribes, the ones growing up in isolated villages with no protection from any major faction. They learn to fear everything. The cold, the storms, the raiders, the monsters, the gods, the dark. They grow up with constant anxiety, never knowing when the next disaster will hit. Some become incredibly resilient, developing survival skills and adaptability that put faction-raised children to shame. Others break under the stress, developing the medieval equivalent of severe anxiety disorders, unable to function normally because normal means constant danger. These kids are the forgotten casualties of the Freljord's political chaos, not important enough for any faction to care about, but numerous enough that their collective suffering represents a massive humanitarian crisis nobody's addressing. Here's something nobody talks about. The Freljord is losing population. Slowly, steadily, year after year, there are fewer Freljordians. The birth rate can't keep up with the death rate. Too many people die in raids, in storms, from disease, from starvation, from accidents, from the daily grind of survival in an impossible environment. Families that used to have 6 kids now have 2 because that's all they can feed. Tribes that numbered in the hundreds now struggle to maintain 50 members. The Freljord is dying through attrition, and everyone's too busy fighting each other to notice the real problem. There might not be a Freljord left to fight over if this continues. Ash sees this trend in her census records. The Avarosan coalition is growing in territory, but not really growing in population. They're just absorbing existing tribes, not creating new Freljordians. Sejuani probably notices too, but sees it as natural selection. Only the strong survive, and if the population shrinks to only the truly worthy, that's fine. Lysandra definitely knows and doesn't care, because from her perspective, fewer people means fewer potential threats to her secrets. But nobody's actually addressing the core issue. The Freljord, as currently structured, cannot sustain human civilization long term. It's a slow-motion collapse, and the only question is whether they'll tear each other apart or freeze to death first. The most tragic part is that solutions exist. If the Freljord united, they could establish more efficient resource distribution. They could build actual infrastructure. They could focus on survival instead of warfare. The combined strength of all 3 major factions plus the independent tribes could potentially even migrate to slightly more hospitable regions or establish trade networks with other parts of Runeterra. But that requires trust, cooperation, and putting aside generations of grievances. It requires everyone agreeing that survival is more important than being right. And in the Freljord, being right, having the correct philosophy about strength versus unity versus purity, matters more to most people than actually surviving. It's like watching a team argue about strategy while their nexus is at 1 HP. Doesn't matter who has the better long-term plan if you're about to lose the game. Let's talk about the languages and how they're fragmenting, because even communication is breaking down in the Freljord. Ancient Freljordian was supposedly a unified language back when the three sisters ruled together. Now there are dialectical variations between tribes that are significant enough to cause misunderstandings. The Winter's Claw has developed shorthand battle language, efficient for raids but lacking vocabulary for complex diplomatic concepts. The Avarosans maintain more traditional speech patterns, preserving old words and stories. The Frostguard uses terminology that references Lyssandra's altered history, with entire concepts that don't exist in other dialects. It's a linguistic Tower of Babel situation, where everyone technically speaks the same language, but communication gets progressively harder across factional lines. This matters more than you'd think. When Avarosan diplomats try to negotiate with Winter's Claw representatives, they're not just fighting ideological differences, they're fighting linguistic drift. Words that mean strategic patience to an Avarosan sound like cowardice to Winter's Claw ears. Concepts of collective strength translate awkwardly into a dialect designed for individual prowess. The Frostguard's language is worst because it's been deliberately modified to serve Lyssandra's propaganda. Entire historical terms have been redefined or erased. Try discussing ancient history when half the relevant vocabulary has been systematically removed from your language. It's like trying to explain league strategy when half the relevant terms have been banned from chat. Communication becomes impossible by design. Some tribes have gone even further into isolation and developed languages the other Freljordians can barely understand. There are remote villages where the dialect has drifted so far that traders need interpreters. These linguistic islands preserve older forms of Freljordian, words and concepts from before the catastrophe, before Lyssandra's revisionism. If anyone knew to look, these isolated dialects contain evidence of the true history, references to events that have been erased from Frostguard records, names that Lysandra tried to delete. But nobody's doing comparative linguistic analysis because they're too busy not freezing to death. The evidence of Lysandra's lies exists in the language itself, scattered across isolated tribes who don't even realize what they're preserving. The spiritual landscape of the Freljord is as fractured as everything else. You've got followers of Volibear, worshippers of Orn, those who revere Anivia, shamans who communicate with ancestor spirits, and a dozen smaller cults dedicated to various nature spirits and demigods. There's no unified religious structure, no agreed-upon theology. Every tribe interprets the divine differently. Some see the gods as literal beings to be worshipped. Others view them as powerful spirits to be bargained with. Still others treat them as metaphors for natural forces. And all of these groups think their interpretation is correct, and everyone else is doing it wrong. The shamans are particularly interesting because they're some of the few people who can actually perceive the magical wrongness of the Freljord. Through vision quests and spirit walking, they've encountered traces of the Watcher's influence. They've felt the holes in reality where the prison's leaking. Some of them have even glimpsed fragments of the true history in their visions. But shamanic visions are notoriously unreliable and symbolic. You might see the truth, but you'll see it wrapped in so many metaphors and spiritual imagery that extracting concrete information is nearly impossible. A shaman might have a vision of the Ice Witch's betrayal, the void that hungers, the prison that cracks, and interpret it as a metaphor for spiritual corruption rather than a literal description of the Freljord's existential threat. Lysandra's relationship with the shamans is complicated. She can't eliminate them all without drawing massive suspicion. Shamanic traditions are deeply rooted in Freljordian culture, but she also can't risk them discovering too much. So the Frostguard has its own shamans, trained in techniques that conveniently direct visions away from dangerous truths. Frostguard shamans experience spiritual journeys that reinforce Lysandra's propaganda, that show her as the eternal protector rather than the original betrayer. And when independent shamans start having problematic visions, the Frost Guard arranges accidents or brings them into the fold where their interpretations can be managed. It's spiritual warfare masquerading as religious diversity, and most shamans don't even realize they're being manipulated. Here's something that would be funny if it wasn't so tragic. The Freljord is sitting on massive mineral wealth that they barely exploit. There are veins of rare metals, deposits of magical crystals, and other resources that would be worth fortunes if properly mined and traded. But sustained mining requires stable settlements, which requires peace, which requires cooperation, which nobody can achieve. So the wealth just sits there, frozen in the ground, while people above starve and fight over scraps. It's like having 5 inhibitors down, Baron buff active, and a clear path to the enemy nexus, but your team's still farming jungle camps instead of ending the game. The few mining operations that do exist are constant targets for raids. You can't maintain infrastructure when it gets destroyed every few months. Some Avarosan settlements have tried establishing protected mining operations with guards and defensive positions. The Winter's Claw raids them anyway because taking processed ore is easier than mining it yourself. The cycle perpetuates. No one can build lasting infrastructure because of raids, so everyone stays poor. So raiding remains the most efficient resource acquisition method. The only way to break this cycle is unified control of resource extraction and distribution, but achieving that requires the cooperation nobody can manage. Lysandra knows about the mineral wealth and actively suppresses large-scale exploitation because successful mining operations would empower tribes outside her control. She'd rather keep the Freljord poor and dependent than risk someone else gaining economic power. It's the ultimate crabs in a bucket mentality. If everyone's struggling, no one can challenge her. The Frost Guard has small secret mining operations that fund their organization, but they're careful not to extract enough to be noticeable. The wealth that could save the Freljord is being deliberately kept in the ground by the one person who claims to protect the region. It's griefing at a civilizational scale. It's like having a support that refuses to ward because they don't want anyone else getting vision control. Technically possible, absolutely detrimental to the team, and somehow they've convinced themselves it's the right strategy. The technology level in the Freljord is deliberately stuck in what would be considered the Bronze Age in other regions, and it's not because Freljordians are incapable of advancement. It's because every time someone invents something useful, it gets destroyed in the next raid or storm or ursine attack. Imagine trying to develop advanced metallurgy when your forge gets smashed every winter. Picture attempting to preserve written knowledge when raiders burn libraries because they can't read anyway, and books don't keep you warm. The Freljord is trapped in a cycle where survival takes all available energy, leaving nothing for progress, which means survival stays difficult, which means no energy for progress. It's a perfect trap. Orin tried to break this cycle by teaching metalworking and crafting techniques. He showed Freljordians how to forge better tools, build sturdier structures, create items that would last. And for a while, it worked. Certain tribes developed genuine craftsmanship traditions, passing skills down through generations. But then Volibear's ursine started specifically targeting these advances, seeing them as corruption of the pure Freljord. Now craftspeople work in secret, hiding their skills because being too good at making things marks you as an ursine target. It's like being good at League, but having to hide your rank because people will dodge your lobbies. Except instead of dodging, they burn down your workshop with you inside it. The Avarosans are trying to preserve and advance practical knowledge. Ash encourages crafts, supports artisans, tries to create conditions where innovation can happen. She's established protected workshops in her larger settlements, places where smiths and crafters can work without constant fear of raids. It's slow progress. You're talking about relearning techniques that were lost generations ago, rediscovering methods that the ursine destroyed. But it's happening, Avarosan metalwork is genuinely improving. Their weapons last longer, their tools work better, and every incremental improvement makes survival slightly less impossible, which frees up slightly more energy for further improvement. It's the opposite of the death spiral the rest of the Freljord is caught in. The Winter's Claw has a complicated relationship with technology. They use weapons and tools, obviously. They're not stupid, but they reject anything they see as making people soft. Sejuani wants her warriors dependent on personal strength, not on equipment or infrastructure. So Winter's Claw gear is functional, but basic. Good enough to kill with, not good enough to rely on. If your weapon breaks, you fight with your hands. If your shelter collapses, you sleep in the snow. This philosophy creates incredibly tough warriors, but also ensures the Winter's Claw can never build anything lasting. They're optimized for the short term, for immediate survival and conquest, at the cost of any long-term development. It's like refusing to buy items in League because real skill doesn't need gear. Technically, you can still play. You're just making it way harder than it needs to be. The really frustrating part is that the Freljord has access to true ice, which is basically a magical super material that could revolutionize their civilization if properly utilized. But because it's so rare and dangerous, and because only Iceborne can safely work with it, true ice remains a restricted resource used almost exclusively for weapons. Imagine if someone figured out how to use true ice for construction. Buildings that never decay, bridges that never collapse, infrastructure that could withstand the Freljord's weather, or true ice for preservation, food storage that keeps supplies frozen and fresh indefinitely. The applications are endless, but nobody's even trying because all the true ice goes to making weapons for tribal warfare. It's resource misallocation on a massive scale, and everyone's too caught up in factional conflict to notice they're sitting on the solution to most of their problems. Let's talk about what love and relationships look like in a region defined by survival, because people still form bonds even when everything's trying to kill them. Actually, maybe especially because everything's trying to kill them. When life is brutal and short, connections matter more. Marriages in the Freljord are often strategic, uniting families, combining resources, strengthening alliances. But they're also genuine partnerships because you literally need someone to watch your back while you sleep. Romance exists, but it's practical romance. You fall in love with someone who can fight beside you, who will share their rations when yours run out, who won't abandon you when things get desperate. Ashe and Trindamir's marriage started political, but became real, and that's honestly beautiful given the circumstances. They could have stayed purely strategic partners, fulfilling their obligations while maintaining emotional distance. Instead, they chose to actually build something together. Ashe sees Trindamir's rage and trauma and doesn't try to fix him. She just accepts him as he is while offering stability. Trindamir sees Ashe's idealism and doesn't mock it. He protects it, fights for it, even when he doesn't fully understand it. They balance each other. She's the brain, he's the muscle. She plans, he executes. And they both respect what the other brings to the partnership. It's a functional relationship in a region where most people die before finding that kind of compatibility. But relationships in the Freljord also mean constant grief. You watch people you love die. Partners lost to raids or storms or simple accidents. Children who don't survive their first winter. Friends who vanish during hunts and never return. The Freljord teaches you to love hard and let go fast because attachment in a place this deadly is a guaranteed path to heartbreak. Some people shut down emotionally, refusing to form deep connections because the pain of loss isn't worth it. Others love anyway, defiantly, knowing they'll hurt but choosing connection over isolation. Neither approach is wrong. Both are survival strategies for a region that punishes emotional vulnerability. The Winter's Claw handles relationships with typical brutality. Marriages are arranged based on strength and genetics, pairing warriors who'll produce strong children. Love is seen as a luxury, a distraction from survival. If you happen to love your assigned partner, great. If not, deal with it and focus on not dying. Children are raised communally because individual parents might die at any moment, and the tribe needs to ensure kids survive even when their birth parents don't. It's efficient, it's emotionally devastating, and it creates generations of people who struggle with intimacy because they were literally taught that emotional attachment is dangerous weakness. Avarice and culture allows for more emotional freedom, but that comes with its own pain. You're encouraged to love, to form genuine bonds, to build families based on affection rather than pure strategy. Which means when winter's claw raids kill your spouse, when disease takes your children, when accidents claim your parents, the grief hits harder. You're not emotionally armored against it. The Avarosans believe the capacity for love and grief is what makes them human, what separates them from the savage violence of the winter's claw or the cold calculation of the frost guard. They might be right, but humanity hurts in a region designed to crush it. Here's something that keeps Freljordian leaders awake at night: the knowledge that they're one disaster away from complete collapse, one especially brutal winter, one plague, one major defeat in battle. Any of these could break a tribe beyond recovery. The margins are that thin. Every leader is constantly gambling with their people's lives, making choices where the wrong decision means everyone dies. Ash gambles on diplomacy and unity, betting that cooperation will prove more sustainable than constant warfare. Sejuani gambles on strength and aggression, betting that taking what you need is more reliable than trusting others to share. Lyssandra's not gambling. She's already lost but refuses to admit it, just desperately trying to keep all the plates spinning for another few centuries. This constant existential pressure affects decision-making in ways that outsiders don't understand. When a Noxian commander questions why Freljordian tribes can't just negotiate peace, they're missing the context. Peace requires surplus, extra food, extra resources, extra security. The Freljord has no surplus. Everyone's operating at the edge of survival. Cooperation. Sounds great until you're choosing between feeding your tribe or sharing with potential enemies. Trust is wonderful until trusting the wrong person gets your children killed. The moral high ground is admirable until everyone standing on it freezes to death. This is why Ash's diplomatic mission is so difficult. She's not just asking tribes to cooperate, she's asking them to take enormous risks with their survival on the promise of future stability. She's asking people to share their limited resources now for theoretical abundance later. She's asking them to trust when trust has historically gotten people killed. And some tribes look at her offer and think, this sounds great, but if it fails, we all die. That's not cowardice or short-sightedness. That's rational risk assessment when you're already at the edge of viability. Ash is essentially asking people to invest in a risky startup when they can barely afford food. The pitch has to be perfect, and the results have to materialize fast, or the whole thing collapses. Sejuani's approach eliminates these uncertainties. You don't trust anyone outside your tribe. You don't share unless forced. You take what you need and defend what you have. It's brutal, but it's reliable. You know exactly where you stand, strong enough to survive or weak enough to die. There's clarity in that. No false promises, no betrayed trust, no gambling on cooperation that might fail. The Winter's Claw knows that every other tribe is a potential threat or resource, and they act accordingly. It's honest in a way that Avarosan diplomacy can never be, because Ash has to promise future benefits while Sejuani only deals in present realities. Lyssandra's position is different because she's operating on a completely different time scale. She's thinking in centuries while everyone else thinks in seasons. The frost guard might struggle this winter or the next, but Lysandra knows they'll survive because she'll make sure they survive. She has resources hidden away, knowledge accumulated over millennia, magic that can create advantages other factions can't match. But this long-term thinking also makes her disconnected from mortal concerns. What's one village lost to raids when you're measuring success in centuries? What's one generation of suffering when you're preventing an eternal apocalypse? Lysandra's moral calculus is completely alien to normal humans because she's not normal anymore. She's a problem-solving algorithm wearing a human shape, optimizing for keep the Watchers sealed above all other considerations, including basic humanity. Let's talk about the animals of the Freljord, because the wildlife here is as unhinged as everything else. You've got regular animals that have adapted to survive in impossible conditions. Wolves with fur so thick they look like moving snowdrifts. Elk that can break through ice to find frozen plants. Birds that somehow migrate through storms that would kill anything else. Then you've got the magical animals. Yetis, ice drakes, frost serpents, and things that don't have names because everyone who sees them dies. The line between animal and monster is pretty blurred in the Freljord. Everything's dangerous, everything's desperate, and everything will absolutely eat you if given the chance. Bristle, Sejuani's war boar, isn't just a big pig. He's a Freljordian druvask, a species of boar that's basically a tank with tusks. These things can gore through a grown warrior in full armor. They're aggressive, territorial, and smart enough to hold grudges. The fact that Sejuani bonded with one and trained it as a mount is genuinely impressive. It's like taming a raid boss and riding it into battle. Most Druvas kill anyone who gets close. Bristle lets Sejuani ride him because they have mutual respect built through years of shared combat. He's not a pet. He's a partner who could kill her instantly if he wanted, but chooses not to because she's proven herself worthy. The Yetis are particularly interesting because they're intelligent. Not animal intelligent, people intelligent. They have language, culture, families, but they're also massive, powerful, and generally isolated from human society. Most Freljordians hunt Yetis, see them as monsters or resources. The Yetis understandably respond with violence. It's a cycle of mutual hostility based on misunderstanding and resource competition. Nunu and Willem prove that cooperation is possible, that Yetis and humans can be genuine friends. But they're the exception. Most interactions between species end in violence because both sides are desperate and scared and have learned that attacking first is safer than trusting. Then, there are the creatures that are definitely monsters, things touched by the Watcher's influence or warped by Lysandra's magic. Ice trolls that regenerate from wounds, frost serpents that freeze prey solid before eating them, things that look like bears but move wrong, hunt wrong, scream in frequencies that shouldn't exist. These aren't natural predators adapted to an environment. They're corruption given physical form, existing in the spaces where reality is thin. Hunters who encounter these things rarely survive to report them, which means most Freljordians think they're myths or exaggerations. But the shamans know. They've seen evidence of reality-warped creatures increasing in frequency and aggression. Another sign the prison's weakening, though nobody's connecting the dots yet. The Freljord also has these massive migrations of animals moving across the ice, following patterns that predate human civilization. Entire herds of elk, traveling from feeding ground to feeding ground. Packs of wolves following the herds. Tribes following the wolves following the herds in this massive, interconnected food chain spanning the entire region. These migrations are sacred to many Freljordians. They represent the natural order, the rhythm of life in the frozen wastes. Disrupting them is seen as inviting disaster because if the migrations fail, everything dependent on them collapses. But the migrations are changing. Routes that have been consistent for generations are shifting. Animals are appearing in places they shouldn't. B. Avoiding areas they previously frequented. The shamans interpret this as the land itself being disturbed, which is accurate. The increasing magical corruption from the failing prison is affecting wildlife behavior. Animals are more sensitive to reality distortions than humans. They can feel when something's wrong with the environment and adapt accordingly. The fact that migrations are changing should be a massive warning sign. But most Freljordians just adapt to the new patterns without questioning why they changed. It's like ignoring a check engine light because the car still runs. Sure, it's working now. That doesn't mean everything's fine. Let's address the war crimes, because both sides in the Freljordian conflicts commit them regularly, and neither side acknowledges it. Raiding tribes don't just take resources, they slaughter anyone who resists, enslave those who surrender, and burn what they can't carry. The Avarosans execute raiders publicly as warnings, which is understandable from a deterrence perspective, but absolutely counts as cruel and unusual punishment. The Frostguard disappears people who ask wrong questions, and nobody questions where they go because everyone's too scared to ask. The Ursine. The Ursine's entire philosophy is basically one extended war crime against the concept of civilization. The problem is that in the Freljord, normal rules don't apply. Or rather, they can't apply because survival comes first. When you're one bad winter away from extinction, concepts like proportional response and humane treatment of prisoners become luxuries you can't afford. You execute raiders because feeding prisoners means your own people starve. You enslave captives because you need labor, and letting them go means they'll attack you again. You commit atrocities not because you're evil, but because the alternative is dying, and human morality tends to prioritize survival over ethics when forced to choose. This doesn't make it okay, it makes it tragic, because everyone involved knows what they're doing is wrong by any reasonable moral standard. They do it anyway, and they justify it by pointing at their opponents doing the same things. We execute prisoners because they execute ours. We raid civilians because they raid ours. We commit atrocities because they committed them first, and we can't afford to be the only side showing mercy. It's a race to the bottom, where everyone loses their humanity incrementally, and nobody can stop, because stopping unilaterally means dying while your enemies continue being brutal. Ash wants to break this cycle, to establish actual rules of engagement that all tribes respect. She's proposed things like prisoner exchanges, protection for non-combatants, and limitations on what's acceptable in raids. It's genuinely noble. It's also nearly impossible to enforce when you can't even get tribes to stop killing each other, let alone agree on how to kill each other more ethically. Sejuani rejects the entire concept. Why would you handicap yourself with rules when your enemies might not follow them? The Winter's Claw fights to win, and winning means surviving, and survival justifies anything. There's no referee in the Freljord's conflicts. There's no international law. There's just violence and the justifications people create to live with the violence they commit. The generational trauma this creates is immense. Children raised watching their parents commit atrocities grow up thinking this is normal. Kids who survive massacres become adults who commit massacres, perpetuating the cycle. The Freljord is producing generation after generation of traumatized people who then traumatize the next generation, and nobody has the resources or stability to address the underlying psychological damage. They're all just surviving, doing terrible things to continue surviving, and passing that trauma down to their children who will do the same. It's like being stuck in a toxic ranked grind where everyone's flaming everyone else, and new players join, see the toxicity, and assume that's just how the game is played. Eventually, the toxicity becomes self-perpetuating, even if the original causes are addressed. Here's the nightmare scenario nobody wants to think about. What if the Watchers breaking free is actually inevitable? What if Lyssandra's not keeping them sealed? She's just delaying the inevitable. Every year the prison weakens. Every year it takes more power to maintain. At some point, Lysandra won't have enough power left, or she'll die. Unlikely given her immortality, but not impossible. Or something will damage the prison beyond her ability to repair. And then what? The Watchers emerge, and the Freljord's political conflicts become instantly irrelevant because everyone's fighting for existence against beings that want to unmake reality itself. The truly horrifying part is that nobody's preparing for this. Lysandra can't prepare people without revealing why the preparation is necessary, which would require admitting her betrayal. The shamans sense something's wrong, but don't have concrete information. Ash and Sejuani are too busy with their political conflict to consider threats beyond each other. Volibear doesn't care. He'd probably welcome the chaos. Ornn's isolated in his forge. Anivia knows but can't force mortals to act. So the Freljord is sleepwalking toward apocalypse while everyone argues about who should be in charge when it arrives. If the Watchers do break free, the response will be too little, too late. The tribes are divided, weakened by constant warfare. They've forgotten the ancient techniques used to fight void creatures. The Iceborne bloodlines are fewer and weaker than they were millennia ago. The magical knowledge that could help has been deliberately suppressed by Lysandra to hide her secrets. The Freljord is objectively less prepared to fight the Watchers now than they were when the Watchers almost won. It's like going into a ranked game several divisions lower than your previous match, with worse teammates, against the same opponents who nearly beat you last time. The math doesn't favor survival. The only hope would be genuine unity. If all factions actually work together, if they combined their strengths and resources, if they could set aside their differences to face the existential threat, maybe they'd have a chance. Maybe Ash's diplomacy, Sejuani's strength, Lysandra's knowledge, the Ursine's ferocity, and the faith of various religious factions could combine into something capable of fighting reality-ending void monsters. It's possible. It's just incredibly unlikely given current trajectory. They're more likely to still be fighting each other when the Watchers emerge, and then everyone dies except Lysandra, who gets to spend eternity in a formless void regretting her decisions. Which, honestly, is probably the punishment she deserves, but it seems excessive to doom everyone else for her mistakes. The Freljord's greatest weakness is that everyone's right from their own perspective. Ash is right that unity would solve most of their problems. Sejuani's right that strength is essential for survival. Lysandra's right that the Watchers are the real threat. Volibear's right that civilizations softened the Freljordians. Ornn's right that practical knowledge would improve everything. Anivia's right that they need to remember their history and learn from it. Everyone's correct about their piece of the puzzle. But nobody can see the full picture because they're too invested in their own perspective, too certain that their way is the only way that works. This is why outside observers from other Runeterra regions look at the Freljord and don't understand why they can't just fix things. It seems simple from the outside. Just stop fighting each other, work together, solve the obvious problems. But when you're inside the situation, when you've got generations of trauma and justified grievances and genuine philosophical differences, when you're operating at the edge of survival with no margin for error, when trust has been weaponized and cooperation has historically ended in betrayal, simple solutions become impossible. The Freljord is trapped in a Nash equilibrium where everyone's current strategy is optimal given what everyone else is doing, even though everyone would be better off if they all changed strategies simultaneously. But getting everyone to change simultaneously requires trust and coordination that doesn't exist. So the ice continues to crack. The prison continues to weaken. The tribes continue to fight, and somewhere deep beneath the howling abyss, the Watchers continue to wait, patient as only ageless beings can be, knowing that eventually, inevitably, humans will fail to maintain what three sisters died to create. The Freljord's not ending with a bang. It's ending with a slow, grinding decline into chaos, punctuated by brief moments of hope that never quite deliver salvation. It's the saddest kind of tragedy because it's completely avoidable and everyone knows it's avoidable. But nobody can make the necessary changes because the necessary changes require everyone changing together. And that's the one thing the Freljord has proven it cannot do. So tonight, as you're lying there in your warm bed, in your room with heating and walls, and a door that actually keeps the cold out, just take a moment to appreciate that you don't live in the Freljord. You're not choosing between raiding your neighbors for food or watching your family starve. You're not fighting in a political conflict that's been going on for thousands of years with no end in sight. You're not living on top of a frozen prison that's slowly failing, wondering if today's the day reality-eating void monsters break free and delete existence itself. At least your problems are normal. Sure, maybe you're hard stuck in your rank. Maybe your teammates are griefing. Maybe you just lost your 8th promo series, and you're questioning why you even play this game. But you know what? You can close League. You can Alt F4. You can take a break, touch grass, come back when you're ready. The Freljord doesn't have that option. They're stuck in an infinite game where surrender isn't available, and the only win condition is, somehow don't die today, then do it again tomorrow. Ash is out there right now trying to unite tribes that have been enemies for generations, betting everything on the hope that cooperation can overcome centuries of justified grievances. Sejuani's leading the Winter's Claw through another brutal winter, making the hard choices that keep her people alive even when those choices destroy her humanity piece by piece. Lyssandra's maintaining her eternal lie, spending every moment of her immortal existence covering up mistakes she made millennia ago, knowing that if she fails, everyone dies. Tryndamere's fighting his rage and trauma while trying to be a good partner to Ash. Brahm's out there being wholesome in a region that punishes wholesomeness. And somewhere beneath the howling abyss, the Watchers are waiting, patient and hungry, counting down to the moment the ice finally cracks. None of them get to rest. None of them get to quit. They're all trapped in their roles, playing out a tragedy that started before they were born and will probably continue long after most of them are dead. The only one who can't die is Lysandra, and she's the one who probably wants to the most. So yeah, your ranked games are rough. Your teammates are questionable. Your LP gains are unfair. But at least you're not living in a frozen hellscape fighting an unwinnable war against enemies on all sides while secretly sitting on an apocalypse that could trigger at any moment. At least you just have to deal with Freljordian champions in-game. You don't have to actually live there, survive there, or make the impossible choices they make every single day. The Freljord story isn't over. Somewhere in that frozen wasteland, things are building toward a conclusion. Maybe Ash succeeds in uniting the tribes. Maybe Sejuani conquers everyone through sheer force of will. Maybe Lyssandra's secrets finally come to light. Maybe the Watchers break free and everyone has to team up to survive. Or maybe they all just keep fighting each other until there's nothing left to fight over. We don't know yet. The story's still being written in blood and ice. But for now, you can rest easy. You're safe. You're warm. And you don't have to wake up tomorrow and fight for your survival against a region designed to kill you. Sweet dreams, gamers. May your sleep be warmer than the Freljord, your dreams less traumatic than Sejuani's childhood, and your morning better than whatever disaster Lyssandra's dealing with right now. GG, sleep tight, and remember, at least you're not iceborne. That's not the blessing you think it is.